Karen called law enforcement, not knowing I run the whole department. It started with a fence, one fence post to be exact, brand new cedar, 444 square cut, sitting 6 inches taller than what Karen Whitlock decided was community standard. The thing is, I don't live in a community with standards, not the kind she pretends to enforce. Anyway, I live on a corner lot in Hampton Ridge, an unincorporated stretch of South Carolina about 6 miles outside city limits. Old farmland turned modern sprawl. No official HOA, just wide porches, stubborn dogs, and families trying to mind their own business. And me, I'm Chief Elijah Rhodes, head of the Tri-County Law Enforcement Department, 23 years in the force, 13 in command. I've led hostage negotiations, carted off corrupt judges, and built cross-agency task forces. But none of that prepared me for Karen. She came strutting up my driveway one humid Tuesday morning, clipboard tucked tight under her elbow, sunglasses perched like she'd read somewhere that power is 70% posture. "You can't install that fence," she said flatly. I didn't look up from my post hole digger. "I've got a permit. Doesn't matter. It violates Hampton Ridge perimeter alignment protocols." I paused. "We don't have alignment protocols," she scoffed. "Yes, we do. Page 3 of the Hampton Ridge Community Stewardship Addendum." I set down the digger, she pulled out a pamphlet. It was printed on cream cardstock, looked official, even had a little acorn logo. But the county had no record of an HOA. I knew that because I signed off on zoning compliance in this area myself. Karen didn't flinch. She pointed toward my fence, tapping her pen like it was a gavel. "You have until Friday to remove it or face enforcement." I stared at her, then said calmly, "Karen, I am the enforcement." Her eyes narrowed. And from that moment on, I knew she wasn't just delusional, she was dangerous. She started slow. First, she posted flyers about non-compliant structures on mailboxes throughout the neighborhood. Half the folks ignored her. Some thought it was real, but it didn't stop there. She showed up again 2 days later with two men both in fake navy polos with the words Hampton Ridge Residential Enforcement stitched above the chest. One had a measuring wheel. The other carried a body cam strapped to his vest like some amateur cop cosplay. Karen stayed behind the line, arms folded, watching them take notes in front of my property. My wife, Nicole, stepped onto the porch and asked politely what they were doing. "You're being assessed," Karen said without missing a beat. "For what height discrepancies, zoning disobedience, potential light pollution from the exterior sconces." Nicole laughed. "You mean the porch lights?" Karen didn't smile. "That's strike 3. That night, we found a red sticker on our front door. Zone warning, final notice. She'd crossed the line. And I wasn't just going to push back, I was going to blow the whole thing wide open. I don't make a habit of flexing my badge. Not at the grocery store, not at the post office, and sure as hell not in my own front yard. But by Thursday, Karen's fake HOA had gone from annoying to something that looked like a poorly disguised racket. The red sticker on our door had Nicole pissed, but it was the mailer that arrived the next morning that truly crossed the line. An envelope cream-colored, no stamp. Hand-delivered was addressed to resident, Hampton Ridge Zone 4. Inside was a citation, $425 fine for noncompliance with perimeter aesthetic mandate. Below it, instructions to make payment to Hampton Ridge Stewardship Council via a shady-looking URL. The kind of site you'd expect to sell fake Ray-Bans or Miracle Weight Loss tea. Nicole just stared at it. She really thinks she can collect money from us. She thinks she can collect it from everyone, I said, setting down my coffee. Now, I'd kept a low profile since moving to Hampton Ridge. No press, no department logo on the mailbox. I wanted peace, but peace doesn't mean silence. And when silence enables people like Karen, it turns into rot. That evening, I got to work. Not with force, not yet. With facts. I pulled county registry logs, searched the Secretary of State's site, and found zero records of an HOA filing or active nonprofit under Hampton Ridge Stewardship Council, which meant they weren't just a fake HOA. They were an illegal operation. But here's the thing, people were paying. Over the next 2 days, I spoke with 14 neighbors, most of them older, soft-spoken, new to the area, and 9 had paid Karen in the last year, fines, maintenance fees, even what she called community investment donations. All of it fake. One guy, a retired bus driver named Leonard, whispered like he was scared. She told me if I didn't pay the monthly fee, my sidewalk would be condemned. It's a public sidewalk. Leonard, I said gently. She said she had friends on the force. I smiled, though it wasn't a kind smile. Yeah, Leonard. She really doesn't. By Sunday morning, Karen escalated. A patrol unit was dispatched to my address. Not ours, not city or county. A private security company, Aero Response Group, out of Greenville drove a black Dodge Charger up my drive and claimed to be investigating municipal noncompliance. The driver wore aviators and a knockoff badge. Sir, we've been contacted by the Hampton Ridge Community Office. We're here to issue a final compliance warning and assess your property. I stepped outside in jeans and a t-shirt. You got a warrant? No, sir, but badge number. He hesitated. You're trespassing, I said flatly, and impersonating a law enforcement officer. You got about 10 seconds before this becomes a felony. He blinked, clearly unsure what to do. That's when I reached into my wallet and showed my real badge. Chief Elijah Rhodes, Tri-County Law Enforcement. You've got 7 seconds left. He bolted. It was time. I called an emergency meeting with my internal investigations unit and the county DA. We set a plan into motion. Karen thought she'd be holding a compliance inspection walkthrough that Wednesday she'd posted about it on Facebook and Nextdoor, like it was some grand tour. She didn't know half the neighborhood was now feeding me intel, or that 2 plainclothes officers would be shadowing the event with body cams rolling. She didn't know I had a court-approved sting ready to expose the entire fraudulent scheme. But most of all, she didn't know that the person she'd been threatening, citing, and intimidating for weeks was the man who ran every officer within a 40-mile radius. And then, like a kid lighting a match in a dry barn, Karen made her fatal mistake. She called 911. On me. Nicole was trimming roses when the sheriff's dispatcher pulled into our driveway, with sirens off but lights flashing. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, clearly uncomfortable. Chief, one of them said, glancing over his shoulder toward the street. We got a call about a violent man constructing unauthorized fencing while armed. Said the scene was hostile. I just nodded, sighing. Karen stood on the sidewalk with her phone out, filming like she was a citizen journalist cracking a case. I waved, "Hey Karen, you didn't mention I'm your boss's boss." She lowered the phone. Just a little. Karen's hand trembled slightly, though she tried to mask it by adjusting her sunglasses. You're interfering with community protocol, she barked from the sidewalk. I stood firm, arms crossed, fence post still unfinished behind me. The sun was high, humidity thick, and everyone on the street had come out of their houses by then, porches full, phones out, eyes fixed. Deputy Klein, one of my officers, shifted uncomfortably. Chief, we received a 911 call reporting a potential domestic threat involving a firearm. I don't even have my belt on, I said flatly. My Glock's locked in the safe inside the house. My wife's pruning roses. If that's a domestic threat, then God help the rest of this county. Karen stepped forward. There are children in this neighborhood. This man is unstable, aggressive, and illegally modifying property, ma'am, Deputy Klein said. You filed a false emergency call. That's a serious offense. It wasn't false, she snapped. He threatened enforcement officers. He has no permit for that structure. Klein turned to me. Do you have your documentation? Chief, I didn't answer. Instead, I slowly walked into the garage and returned with a folder. Inside county permit for the fence land survey. Email from the zoning board confirming the absence of any registered HOA. And just for good measure, a printed version of Karen's fake zone violation notice, complete with her name in bold at the bottom. I handed it to Klein, who flipped through it slowly. You want to read that into your body cam, I asked. He nodded, jaw set. Already rolling. Sir? Karen realized the tide had turned, but she wasn't ready to go down easy. "You can't bully people just because you wear a badge," she shouted. I looked at her. Deadpan. "I don't bully people. You're confusing me with yourself." Gasps from the crowd. Even her two fake enforcers, standing awkwardly near her Prius, didn't say a word. That's when Nicole stepped down from the porch and handed me her phone. "Channel 8 just picked it up," she whispered. "Live streaming now." Karen's mouth twitched. "This is harassment." "No, ma'am," Deputy Klein said. "This is accountability." Within an hour, my team executed a warrant. It had been waiting, signed and sealed. We needed one last act of public interference from Karen to pull the trigger, and she delivered. We searched the Whitlock residence that afternoon. Inside a filing cabinet filled with citations, envelopes containing cash and money orders, spreadsheets tracking who had paid fees, and a handwritten list titled Target Homes, Next Phase. My name was circled at the top. Under it, Leonard retired. Mrs. Farron widow, 84. Jones family renters. Next to each, a dollar value and a date. Karen hadn't just been bluffing her way through fake rules. She had a system, a business. The fake Hampton Ridge Stewardship Council website was quickly taken down. County IT traced it to Greg Whitlock, Karen's husband, who conveniently skipped town the same morning his wife went viral. He didn't get far. U.S. Marshals picked him up in Asheville, claimed he was just the web guy. Turns out Greg had opened a merchant account under a non-existent LLC and funneled $47,000 in fines and donations into 3 separate accounts. The state AG's office joined the case by Friday. Karen was now facing 2 counts of fraud: false impersonation of government authority, unlawful surveillance, abuse of emergency call system, conspiracy to defraud seniors. Her bond hearing was Monday. Neighbors who once feared her began showing up on our lawn. One brought pie, another apologized for not seeing it sooner. Even old Leonard said something I won't forget. "She wanted us scared of each other," he said, eyes wet. "You made us remember we're a neighborhood." Karen's mugshot hit the evening news. Hair frizzed, sunglasses gone, still wearing the same linen pantsuit from the 911 call. I won't lie, part of me felt satisfied, but another part, it just felt tired, because this wasn't just about one woman with a clipboard. It was about something bigger, the illusion of power, and what happens when we're too polite to challenge it. Monday morning came like Judgment Day. Karen stood before the county magistrate in a wrinkled blouse and flats that didn't match. She looked nothing like the woman who marched up my driveway with a clipboard and a smirk. She looked tired, cornered, small. But small or not, she'd left a wide wake of damage. The courtroom was packed, not with strangers, but with neighbors. Mrs. Farron sat in the front row, wrapped in a shawl despite the heat. Leonard was beside her, back straight. The Jones family clutched hands in the second row. Even Jessica Tanner, the teenage girl who'd been cited for painting a mural on her family's shed, came with a homemade sign that read, "Fences don't scare us. Liars do." Karen's attorney made the usual appeals. Mrs. Whitlock believed she was acting in the interest of the community. She lacked malicious intent. Her actions were misguided. The judge raised a hand. "Counselor, your client forged citations, intimidated vulnerable residents, and created an unregistered organization for personal gain. That's not misguided. That's criminal." He set bail at $200, denied her request to leave the county. Karen was led away in cuffs. The courtroom erupted, but not in applause, in silence. That kind of deep, heavy silence that falls when justice finally breathes. That afternoon, I returned home to finish the fence. Nicole brought me lemonade, kissed my cheek, and said, "You sure made a mess of a quiet retirement." I chuckled. This was supposed to be our quiet chapter, but Hampton Ridge was never going to be quiet again. The DA held a press conference later that week, joined by the state attorney general. Together, they announced formal charges against both Karen and Greg Whitlock for orchestrating an HOA scam ring spanning 3 counties. Over $120,000 had been siphoned from residents in 2 years. They'd used every trick in the book: fake fines, doctored inspection notices, threats of liens, and even bogus property condemnations. Karen wasn't just power hungry. She was running a coordinated grift and using the fear of authority to do it. The fallout came fast. All fake fees were declared null and void. A restitution fund was created, managed by the county treasurer. Residents who paid were refunded in full. The Hampton Ridge Stewardship Council was formally dissolved, and legislation was introduced to criminalize unauthorized enforcement activity under HOA pretenses. It was the first law of its kind in the state. They named it the Whitlock Prevention Act. Poetic, but there was still one more thing to do. I called a town hall, rented the community center, and invited everyone, whether they'd been targeted or not. Over 100 people showed up. I stepped up to the front, not as Chief Rhodes, but just Elijah, neighbor, fence builder, husband. Some of y'all knew something was off. I began. Some of you didn't. That's okay. That's how these things work. They thrive in confusion, in silence, in people too tired to argue and too polite to push back. I held up a copy of Karen's fake violation notice. This was a lie, but it worked, because people like Karen know something a lot of us forget. Fear feels real, even when it's not. Heads nodded, folks whispered, and now, I said, we don't get to go back to normal. We get to build better. We formed the Hampton Ridge Neighborhood Assembly that day. No dues, no titles, no enforcement, just neighbors. We created a rotating watch and assist list volunteers to help elderly residents, fix broken gates, check on pets, mow lawns, not because a clipboard said so, but because community should never be coerced. It should be chosen. The first house we helped, Mrs. Farron's. Karen had once threatened her with a $600 lawn uniformity violation because she grew wildflowers in the front yard. We showed up with seed packets and mulch. 3 hours later, she had the most beautiful garden in the county. We called it the free zone. Karen's trial was set for 3 months later. By then, she and Greg had become infamous. Their scam had inspired other counties to investigate similar shadow show cases. People began to realize just how easy it had been to abuse power and how rarely anyone had questioned it. But now people were asking questions, pushing back, and turning porch lights into spotlights. Karen's trial was swift. Not because the system worked fast, but because the evidence was overwhelming. Over 60 witnesses testified, dozens of financial records, surveillance clips, forged documents, and fake notices were submitted. And then came the kicker: Greg's plea deal. He flipped, told the court everything: how Karen orchestrated every violation, how she tracked elderly neighbors and single mothers as easy targets, how she crafted the fake charter herself, and how she coached her enforcers to sound authoritative, but just legal enough to avoid lawsuits. He even brought in the original drafts of her fake bylaws. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all counts. Karen was sentenced to 12 years in state prison with no parole for at least 5. Greg got 6 months in county lockup with a 5-year supervised release. They left the courtroom through separate exits. That was the last we ever saw of them. But what mattered more than the verdict was the echo it left behind, the ripple. Because Hampton Ridge didn't just survive what Karen did. We changed. The Whitlock Prevention Act passed into law just 2 months later. It created mandatory registration for any HOA claiming authority over properties. It also criminalized false representation of code enforcement and made it illegal to collect money from residents without county oversight. The law became a model for surrounding states. A year later, the South Atlantic Homeowners Fairness Council was created. Guess who chaired the founding committee? Me, Chief Elijah Rhodes. The man Karen once tried to scare with a clipboard and a red sticker. We kept the Hampton Ridge Neighborhood Assembly alive. Every month, we met, not just to talk fences and lawn care, but to teach each other how to spot fakes, challenge bad actors, and protect one another. We helped a disabled vet fight off a fake debt collector. We installed cameras at the bus stop where someone had been stealing packages. We built a new wheelchair ramp for a widow whose husband had passed just before Karen hit her, with a porch nonconformity fine. We didn't just rebuild the community, we redefined it. And my fence, it still stands. Taller than most, solid, unapologetic. I left the original red sticker Karen posted inside a shadow box on the porch right under my sheriff's badge, mounted on reclaimed wood. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Let's be honest, power doesn't always show up in a badge or a uniform. Sometimes it walks on kitten heels, carrying a clipboard and a printed violation from a website nobody's ever heard of. But that's the thing about fake authority, it only works when we let it. If someone threatens your peace, if someone tells you that you don't belong, if someone waves a paper in your face and says, pay or else, ask questions, demand receipts, call it out. Because your home isn't just your space, it's your right. And people like Karen, they count on your silence. So let this story be your permission to speak up, to stand tall, to tear down every sticker, every scam, every system of fear that dares step onto your lawn. And if you ever wonder what to do when the next fake enforcer shows up, just smile on a knee and flash your badge. What would you do if a fake HOA came after you? Do you think neighborhood power has gone too far or not far enough? Share your story below. Let's talk about community, justice, and what happens when we stop letting fear decide who holds the pen.